Morning, everyone. Coronavirus news to start us off today, and lots going on with that. An explosion of cases, and largely due to a reclassification and maybe more rapid diagnosis of the disease, or of the virus using CT scans. But yesterday, the virus total stood at 45,170, and today it is 60,402, an increase of, and I feel like the price is right, but it's not, roughly 15,000 people. That's a lot. That is a lot. The death number is, not 1371, and that's day 34. Unbelievable, right? Like that doesn't look like something under control. This curve here was starting to round out, right? If it started to look maybe like this, then there might be an argument to say we're getting under control, but there's another few days to start that now. I mean, that was straight up. And I don't know that it's going to get any better. Here's the Canadian numbers. Ontario specifically, as far as I know, in BC, and it's 10:20 right now. The numbers are updated at 10:30. So these are yesterday's numbers. But the resolved means recovered. I found in another publication that they used recovered. But I think it's weird they use resolved, because they could just put all of the cases under resolved. Death is a resolution, right? Resolved, done. So is getting better and going home, right? That's a resolution as well. And with what we don't know about this virus and the explosion of numbers, I just think that's concerning. But regardless, I don't know if they've discharged these people or if they're still self-isolating. I don't know all the details because I don't think anybody but the people directly involved know those details. And right or wrong, I think public health maybe trumps privacy at this point, but I've been wrong in the past. New York Times is keeping a tab on the Japan cruise ship, and there's other factors in play now in Japan as well. So New York Times is reporting coronavirus live updates. Japan announces its first death. Japan confirms its first death from the coronavirus. The Japanese authorities announced on Thursday it's the first death in the country from the new coronavirus. Health Minister Kato said at a news conference that a woman in her 80s who lived in Kanagawa, prefecture south of Tokyo had died that day. Her death is the third from the coronavirus outside mainland China, after one each in the Philippines and Hong Kong. The Japanese woman had no record of travel to mainland China. Japanese officials also said on Thursday that dozens of new cases had been confirmed, including 44 more on a cruise ship quarantined off of Yokohama. Mr. Kato said that one of the new cases not tied to the cruise ship was a taxi driver in his 70s in Tokyo who tested positive for the virus on Thursday. Mr. Kato said on Thursday that the authorities would begin allowing some cruise ship passengers to serve out the remainder of the quarantine period on shore. Mr. Kato said the passengers 80 or older who have existing medical conditions or who are assigned to cabins without windows or balconies would stay in onshore quarantine facilities until February 19th if they tested negative for the virus. Those who test positive will be taken to hospitals. Crazy, right? So there's more to this story, so link is in the description. It's the New York Times, so it is what it is. Take it with a grain of salt, as everything. Moving to more domestic issues and more hard politics, Scott Moe is tweeting, and he's the Premier of Saskatchewan. He's tweeting, "The rule of law is a fundamental pillar of our Canadian democracy. When did the right to protest turn into the right to illegally impede the lives and livelihoods of law-abiding Canadians?" This is in response to his own tweet. Yesterday at CN, Railway issued warnings that their rail system could be shut down due to these blockades, vastly impacting one of our only methods of transporting products like sustainable agricultural, potash, or manufacturing goods. And there's a whole thread. I'm not going to read through that thread right now. Here is this morning, February 8th. Via Rail is canceling another day of departures on the busiest rail corridor in Canada because protesters dislike something happening 4,000 kilometers away. Ordinary Canadians suffer while elites fly wherever they want first class and post pictures of themselves reciting land acknowledgements. So this has been ongoing. This isn't just starting on the 12th or 13th. Today's the 13th. This has been a week of this and more. And I reported on this yesterday with my blockade report. It has been happening to bridges in BC. It's been happening to crosswalks and streets in Toronto. It's been happening to our leaders as well. This is a picture of Chrystia Freeland, Deputy Prime Minister, trying to attend a meeting and being blocked by anti-pipeline Wet'suwet'en protesters. And here they are, and they're not allowing Ms. Freeland into the building. And you see the mom head tilt, like she's trying to explain reasonably that she will be going into this building. And they say no. And actually, we've got video. Kian Bext is reporting. And this is the other side of the picture that I just showed you. And well, I'll show you. It's a little chaotic. Link is in the description. And I mean, they're having a conversation. Like she's trying to get in, and the protester is being condescending. Now, I don't like Miss Freeland. I don't think she's good at her job. I don't like the party or anything to that effect. But I don't agree at all with this. Right? Like you can't. This is not okay. This is a breakdown of the rule of law in our country, and this is inappropriate. And it's not just me that thinks that, but I'm saying it. And I'm going to show you other people who think that. But I want to be really clear. I'm not celebrating this. This is abhorrent in our country, right? And I think that it is partially Justin Trudeau's fault, right? I think that his lack of stance on this has been as inappropriate as the protest, right? And he has to weigh in. And we saw yesterday during my blockade report that the police have been instructed to stand down on this. They're allowing the protesters to block highways and bridges. It seems insane. It seems very disrespectful of the Canadian taxpayer, of the person who's just trying to get to work, right? It seems like something else is going on here. But I digress. Here is Miss Freeland trying to get into a meeting. Here we go. And, you know, the security people are there and, oh, we'll open it right now. She did get in and have her meeting, but this is just really like people empowered in this way. Here's another example. Stuff like that is not how things get done. I mean, it's effective in shutting things down, but I don't think that that is how you meaningfully move forward in a country like Canada. That is very backwards style of negotiation, one that doesn't work for very long because people get fed up with it, right? Like if you're working and you can't get your product to market because the railways are shut down, pretty soon there's gonna be backlash, right? There's going to be backlash. It's going to happen. People have a breaking point. Here is National Post John Ivison doing an opinion piece. I'm going to read the whole piece. Opinion pieces you can't really take snippets of because like they kind of tell a whole story, right? So I really agree with what he's saying here. So I'm going to read all of it. I think it's a well done piece, and then we're going to look at what Trudeau's doing because he's not taking care of the lawlessness that's happening in his country right now. John Ivison, Canada is turning into a mob city while Trudeau remains silent. Canada is slowly turning from a democracy to a mobocracy as the rule of law is tested from coast to coast. From blocked intersections in downtown Toronto to journalists and legislators being barred entry to the BC legislature from an obstructed CN line affecting rail traffic out of the port of Prince Rupert to the barricades impeding Via Rail's service between Toronto and Montreal. Canada is slowly being choked into submission. The protests are in solidarity with the opposition to the Coastal GasLink pipeline in northern BC by hereditary chiefs of the Wet'suwet'en Nation. But the considerable number of outsiders are using the dispute, as an excuse for mischief. It's impossible to know how many anarchists are at work. The U.S. website It's Going Down has been actively calling for its followers to, quote, shut down the ability of capitalist civilization to function, and has been promoting a campaign to hashtag shut down Canada. Echo warriors like Rising Tide Toronto are calling on its activists to fight actors in the city that, quote, benefit from mega extraction and colonialism. The mob is winning. CN has temporarily closed down parts of its network. and warned of threats to the transportation of food, grain, de-icing fluid for airports, and propane for Quebec and Atlantic Canada. In the face of this declaration of disorder, our politicians have been supine. Justin Trudeau is overseas campaigning for a UN Security Council seat, but encouraged all parties to use dialogue to resolve the problem. The beleaguered Transport Minister Mark Garneau noted that it is illegal to blockade a rail line under the Railway Safety Act, but said it is up to the provinces, not the federal government, to sort it out. It's true that Ottawa could not direct provincial police forces. No one wants a repeat of the Oka crisis. All sides need to show restraint to avoid a bloodbath. But someday, somebody in Ottawa, other than the Conservative leadership candidate Erin O'Toole, should be pointing out that along with the right to protest, there are certain responsibilities to allow other people to go about their business. The Prime Minister should be pointing out that the protesters' case is built on judicial sand. The RCMP on Wet'suwet'en territory are not invading sovereign Indigenous territory, as protesters occupying the Federal Justice Building in Ottawa contend. The Mounties are enforcing an injunction granted by the BC Supreme Court, which gives them the right to arrest people and remove camps designed to block pipeline construction. The 670-kilometer pipeline has support from the 5 Wet'suwet'en bands and their elected chiefs and councils, who have signed financial benefit agreements worth $338 million for the 20 bands along that route, plus contract work for Indigenous business estimated at $620 million. But the project is opposed by hereditary chiefs who argue that they represent Wet'suwet'en traditional governance structure. The common sense view may be that the democratically elected band governments should prevail, but there is no place for common sense when it comes to Crown Indigenous relations. The hereditary chiefs argue that since the pipeline's proponents were not given permission to enter unceded territory, they are in violation of Wet'suwet'en law. The judge presiding over the injunction said the Indigenous customary laws are not viewed as an effectual part of Canadian law, until they are recognized in treaties or court declarations. The landmark case in 2014 said that once Aboriginal title is established, there is a requirement to get consent from First Nations before development can take place. But the Wet'suwet'en have not established title or ownership over their traditional lands in Canadian court or through negotiation. They would likely have a very strong case to take to the Supreme Court of Canada, but while there is a duty to consult, there is no veto. In time, the hereditary chiefs might stop the Coastal GasLink project, but that will be up to the courts. Such nuances are clearly lost on protesters, such as the young activists blockading the Justice Building, who insist that since the land was unceded, it remains sovereign. But that is not the law. Quote, under Canadian law, whether land has established Aboriginal title or not, Canadian courts don't treat it as sovereign, said Dwight Newman, the Canadian Research Chair in Indigenous Rights at the University of Saskatchewan. This is messy stuff, and there is validity in the claim in a blog post by Gavin Smith, a staff lawyer with the West Coast Environmental Law Organization, that the Wet'suwet'en are a classic example of how the Crown and Canadian legal system have overseen a long-term and continuing failure to give effect to the promised recognition of Aboriginal title in Indigenous law. But the law is the law, but the law is all we have, and without it, we will have anarchy, which seems to be precisely what many protesters want. Quote, from their point of view, I'm not sure that Canadian law matters, said Newman. One of the challenging things the Wet'suwet'en case is exposing is that there are a lot of protesters who take the view that something other than Canadian law should be determining a lot of issues within Canada. As BC Premier John Horgan noted of the confrontation at the provincial legislature, things have shifted from the traditional protest to something quite different. Quote, these are extraordinary times, extraordinary events, he said. It's going to take a deft political leadership to defeat the mob without civil conflict. The early signs are not encouraging. And I would agree with that because, well, this is what Trudeau's focusing on, right? This is Joe Warmington tweeting, now to ending rail blockades, Justin Trudeau should end his taxpayer-funded vacation and come home now and get back to work. And this is CTV News tweeting, Trudeau secures Senegal's vote for UN Security Council seat during Dakar trip. And, I mean, how many $1 million did it take? Dave Aiken is tweeting, quote, at an event marking contribution of women peacekeepers, media invited to hear Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Senegal male defense minister talk for 10 minutes and were ushered away before Canada's female ambassador for women, peace and security, or the 10 other women in uniform there, could speak. Isn't that interesting? They segregated it. So, weird, right? Tolerance and diversity, it's our strength. But, we'll let the women speak after. And it's just strange that he's completely ignoring the protests that are shutting down the country, that are frustrating hardworking everyday Canadians, that are getting in the way of goods getting home or getting to market, and money being given to the farmers. I mean, they've got taxes to pay, don't you know? Have you guys seen the Robin Hood with the fox, the Disney one from like the 1950s or 60s? I think it's the 50s. And it seems like the very classic, not Robin Hood, but the Sheriff of Nottingham and the taxes and stuff. People are just barely scraping by, and it's a very, very good comparison. It's a wonder those classics stand the test of time, eh? Those characters just keep popping up. Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com and CanadaReport.co if you've got time. And have a wonderful, wonderful